Okay, I think it's time to get started. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this week's special NC Lug presentation for the NCDOT OpenX Rollout Week. This OpenX refers to the different Bentley Connect editions. NC Lug is proud to partner with North Carolina Department of Transportation to bring you these unit updates. This session, number 5, is for the geotechnical unit. But before we get started, first a few housekeeping details. This webinar is a presentation, so all attendees will be muted. Please mute yourself and do not mute all. At any time during the webinar, you can submit your questions into the chat box. And as time allows, someone will field your answer during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. If at any time your screen freezes or you can't hear the presenter, please just leave the session, leave the Teams link and then come back into it, and that should take care of that issue. We will be recording this webinar and will share the link after the event. NC Lug is offering PDH credits for those who have registered on the website for this event. After this session, NC Lug will send out PDH receipts to those who have attended this live event. No credit will be given to those viewing the recorded presentation. And now I'd like to introduce Christina Brunsma with the Geotechnical Unit as our presenter. And we're also going to have some support with Kevin Miller and Jamie Love to help answer questions. So take it away, Christina.
All right, well, officially good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Christina Brunsma. I am a project and contract geologist with the Geotechnical Engineering Unit. And I'm going to take you through a quick update on where the Geotechnical Engineering Unit is currently on our ORD development and implementation. It's been a very quick, we've hit some pretty good eureka moments over the past month in moving towards displaying our geotechnical information in ORD. And we are still planning on creating 2D products based upon the approved files that we get from our various agencies, such as roadway or hydraulics or the structures unit. So in addition to that, we are also looking in conjunction with ORD implementation, working in ProjectWise. So we've been kind of running tests to make sure that files are accessible, but we are still hoping to work with a static file because geotechnical information is typically a snapshot, and we would like to make sure that we are snapshotting our information at a specific time on a project timeline. So a lot of times what we look for example, in roadway is a 25% approved plan, so that if there are additional changes, we get alerted that an alignment's changed, that we need to review, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of those things aren't necessarily going to change as we move into ORD implementation. So that being said, what we're expecting for our product workflow is we receive a confirmation or a request for geotechnical information at these milestones. For a roadway, we're looking for approved 25% plans. For bridges and culverts, we're looking for accepted bridge culvert survey reports or an accepted and approved preliminary general drawing. For retaining and sound walls, those requests can come at any point in time within a project. So we're looking for, requests for information as those are developed. So what we are thinking as far as moving towards this ORD product workflow is having our geotechnical data presented in a file that can be referenced, but we are still planning on providing a 2D snapshot PDF report of all of our pertinent data. So again, based off of those kind of milestone points within a project's development. So we're still looking at geotechnical title sheets with our caution notices available, our soil and rock legends. We're still looking at creating plan and profile and cross sections as we would need them. And also, depending on the type of product, we'd be looking at providing Gantt logs in PDF form, rock photos, and et cetera, as you would need it for a report. We are currently working on updating our workspaces, and we do plan on maintaining that workspace. And I do believe this has been a pretty hot topic recently about maintaining a workspace on project-wise. But as far as I understand, zip files will still be available to be downloaded that will have our pertinent Gantt files and any ORD files that will be necessary to create a product. Now we're going to get into the a little bit more into the nitty gritty for ORD. A lot of these developments have really come to light over the past couple of weeks for us. Something that you'll probably note in any of our unit work as we plan to work within ORD is making sure that you select as a geotechnical user. You can work as an all user, but if you work as a geotechnical user, it can kind of narrow down a lot of the choices and a lot of the data that you have access to. It might even increase your speed as you work on a geotechnical product. So a workspace would be selected, your work set would be created for a project, and then you would proceed to create a 2D file. So that 2D file will be working specifically with your seed files that would be available in your Connect workspace. And you would use the common naming conventions that we've been using at Geotech for a long time. So once that is created, you will get a 2D file. You can reference in in this particular project, we had information that was a GeoPack in 10 file. As we continued moving forward in ORD, you'd probably be looking at terrain models for existing or proposed. And for this particular project, the majority of our geotechnical data was along our Y4 alignment. So in this particular case, during our work on this, we imported the alignment. We imported the 10 file, and that created a alignment and 10 file on 2D display. And then all that needs to be done is right click and requesting a 2 views plan and 3D, and that will automatically create a 3D 3D view within this particular file. And so once you've got that 2D and that 3D view, there's going to be a multitude of data views and inputs that can be created between plan, profile, cross sections, and stratigraphy as well. So as you move and create that, you'll see in this next slide that you've got a 2D in the left view here, and in a 3D model over here. And you can change your view of all of those specific to preferences and things like that as needed. So this is probably the best place to start with moving on from the survey workflow. So you'll see up here that we've currently been in the survey workflow, used the import export, and from that point on, we can then move into the geotechnical workflow in ORD. And at that point in time, we can bring in, so in this particular case, we do a database connectivity, and we can bring in our GINT file through this particular window. In addition to that, we also associate a XML file. And what that does is it works very similar to our old preference files. If you're familiar with our SS2, SS4 methodologies, and it remembers all of the settings that you would apply in the GANT Civil database connectivity window. So you'd be looking at, you know, your DGN libraries, your cell libraries, holding things like level names, display rules, feature definitions, item types, cells, and that kind of thing that's going to be housed in our workspace. So once that's been completed, you can then run, and I'll zoom in exactly so you can kind of see the geotechnical workflow and your Gantt project. You would then query these points, and then they'll come in. You can actually see that there's intelligence within each of these boreholes where you can see the name, the level, and the like. And when you queue in, I'm going to, once you've queued those in, you can actually see all the borings in the alignment here. And then we're actually going to view all of those in the 3D model. So as the 3D model is active, you can then query all of those points again, and you'll see that these cylinders will come in, and then you just tie it into the terrain that it needs to be tied into. So please note that on this particular demo, it was tied into the proposed, but normally it would be tied into the existing terrain information. But you could actually see in this one that you can rotate it, you can see the cylinders, and from that point, now you've got a plan view, you've got a 3D view that shows all of our borehole symbols and cylinders. And the next step that we're thinking about and working on developing, and you'll see in this video, is creating stratigraphy and meshes. So once you've gotten in all of your data into a 3D, in this point up here, one second. We're going to go again, working in the geotechnical. You can create a mesh and select your lithology, use all of your interpretation and borehole points, and it will create your stratigraphic meshes. Now, this is still in working process, but if you take this and then change your view to a 3 view to see the cross sections, then it can bring in your additional view, and you can see it in cross section. So again, I'm going to play this again so you can kind of see going through here, create a mesh. It's going to take the lithology, all of those points, run it through. Now, as far as we understand the stratigraphy meshes, we should be able to mimic terrain in version 10 of ORD. We're still working on looking through that, and obviously we'll be working hard to see where our how we can make more intelligent stratigraphic models in ORD. So in addition to that, we were looking at how we can display and work with the 3D to display it into a 2D product. So what we're seeing here is kind of a simple line was created. So a smart lane was placed, and we placed it within the borings or boreholes that happen to be at that location. So you'll see here we're placing a line that catches, in this particular case, I think 6 boreholes. And then we create a cross section using view and selecting our points in question. And what that will do is, in this particular case, it's created a cross section based off of all of those locations. So it's kind of like a profile. This could also come into play and be really helpful when we're creating products for structures. So in this particular case, we've switched this so that it shows the soil patterns. And this is a 2D product where you can see both the pattern that you would expect for an AASHTO that you would see on our legend. And you can also see the lithology stratas coming into this particular cross section. So in this particular case, it's kind of more of a fenced application, but when you're talking roadways, we're looking at hoping to batch out our cross sections. So the next slide that we'll see is actually taking and creating a multitude of cross sections. Now, previously, what we would do is we would place our borings in, and they would project back or forward to the closest cross section, typically at a 50-foot interval. What we're noticing and looking at now with ORD is that it is very advantageous to have it create cross sections at point events or borings. So in this particular case, we select our boundary. We can select our roadway cross-section files so that when we create the sheets, they'll come in on the files that have been created by roadway, or the sheets that have been created by roadway. And then we can select our points, in this particular case, our boreholes. So once we've created our event point list, and you'll see that coming up here in a second, and we're still working out some bugs on this particular function, but basically we'll select a point event, and it is going to draw cross sections through every boring on this project. So if you can see that it kind of puts, you can actually see the cross sections here. They're perpendicular to the alignment, and they have been created across the entire Y4 alignment. Each of these slices are going through our boreholes. And at this point in time, then we can create the sheets. And as that processes, I cut a little time out of there so we don't have to wait for, it does take a bit for it to build those cross sections, but here you'll see that the cross section sheets have been created, and you'll see the stratigraphy coming in and the boreholes displayed. And something that we're kind of working on right now is making sure that those cross sections will show. Now, what you're seeing here, you're seeing in 3D the slices that have been created, and in 2D you can see the cross sections in plan. So Obviously, it wants to make a cross section at each point event. So you may have a boring that's at 12 plus 0.5 and one that's at 12 plus 0.0. At this point in time, it is going to create a cross section at each of those event points perpendicular to the alignment that you selected. But the good news is that when you create these slices in the settings, it should accommodate however deep your boring is, similar to the old clip windows and the intelligence that we had in Geotech creating cross sections. So you won't have any clip issues, and it should accommodate the full depth of your borings. Make sure that I'm not missing anything there. But so our future geotechnical engineering ORD targets, what we're still kind of working on. We're trying to make sure that we have consistent patterning for our 2D strips. We want to finalize our cells, our levels, and the XML that will be necessary to make sure that data that we are creating in GINT is displaying properly as we start to work with said data in ORD. So once we get our AASHTO patterns settled, we also want to refine the stratigraphic and lithographic meshes. And we also want to look into making sure that we're doing consistent batch annotations based on the item types. In addition, we'll also be looking at our, if we have laboratory samples, so on a roadway where you would see the sample numbers above, above the boring that they're associated with, looking into seeing if we can script it so that that data comes in when we bring in get data, as well as things like our water table data. So we're all looking at refining those, but we've got good groundwork and we've got a good start on that. Now we're trying to just fine tune how we're doing those. Once we've got that, then we can test it directly with additional roadway and structure projects within ORD. Our products, as we're thinking right now, that are going to be going to the clients, they're not going to really change too much. With a roadway, we're still going to be providing an inventory that has all the borings presented on plan, profile, and cross sections as necessary, and those will be done as a PDF snapshot, and it's typically going to be based on the approved 25% plans. Cross sections will likely not be every 50 feet like we would do on previous products with SS4, but going through each of the borings, and we can make additional cross sections as necessary. That's one of the beauties of ORD. We can kind of batch out cross sections and then batch out additional cross sections. Now, for recommendations, there is still a fair amount of discussion that's going on internally in regards to what our workflow for our recommendations are going to be, in regards to what products are provided, like your recommendation letter, graphics, that kind of thing. So that is still something that has a lot of debate and discussion that needs to be done. For structures, we've focused a lot on roadway procedures, but that's because that's typically the most complex and most time-consuming type of product that will be made for Geotech. But as far as structures are concerned, we think that a lot of the things that we're learning in our roadway ORD tests can be utilized to create a PDF report with a plan, a profile, cross sections, on top of our standard information like our Gantt logs and any core photos and the like. So in this particular case, we might be looking at creating a profile and using something more like the fence example that we showed earlier, so that we can cut along a bent line and then project borings within a buffer zone onto said quote unquote bent line or profile in this case. So that is currently in a lot of discussion, but we have not started testing specifically for structure products. Now, this just occurred last night and this morning. Kevin has been working on developing patterns that can work within the 3D for the cylinders for quite a while. And it looks like we've had some success in displaying those cylinders with our AASHTO patterns. So what you're seeing on this particular one is the same data that we were working with on this project previously in our examples. And you can actually see that there's patterning that in this particular case that mimics what you would see in our legend, in GINT, and the like. So the next one is showing that we can even pattern the meshes. So when we create a lithology strata breaks, they can even pattern across that whole area. And you still see in the cylinders as well with those AASHTO classifications. And then when you break it down into cross-section sheets, we've had success in getting our cylinders to show all of our AASHTO classifications, and then you can actually see the lithology is also patterned. But that's hot off the presses, just figured out with Kevin, and working towards making sure that we've got that consistency with our patterning, moving from a 3D view to a 2D snapshot product. So that's it for our update on the geotechnical engineering's progress as far as working in ORD. I'd like to thank my team for, putting this together pretty quickly. And what we'd like to do now is to kind of set up a Q&A and also maybe a roundtable to get viewers' thoughts in regards to what you've seen so far today, what you think might be nice to see for future ORD development, and any concerns that you might have in moving forward with ORD. So at that point in time, I'm going to open up the forum. We're going to look at any comments that you might have had in the chat window, and if you have any other questions, feel free to raise your hand, and we can also see if we can discuss this further. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Christina. I appreciate that. That was some great information, and it looks like things are developing quite well. I did want to point out that there's been quite a bit of conversation going on through the chat. I know, Christina, that you haven't had the opportunity to look at that. And Kevin's been answering some of these questions. And Kevin, is there anything in particular that was going on in the chat that you would like to bring up to the group to kind of start those conversations? And I also wanted to invite the participants, if you want to unmute yourself, like you can raise your hand and I can try to call on you, but if you unmute yourself to ask questions, that's also okay. Feel free to do that. Kevin, I'm going to give it to you now.
Sure. Couple questions here. Is all the stratigraphy auto-generated, or will we be able to draw our own 3D stratigraphy? What was shown, yes, was auto-generated. The issue that you have in 3D when working with limited data is sometimes those meshes don't do exactly what you think they're going to do. There is a tool that allows you to add what's called an interpretation point. We've not really played around with that much yet, so there's still some work to be done. But as always, some hand modification is likely going to be necessary, even when using interpretation points. And there was another question about soil descriptions. Soil descriptions need to be somehow done by hand. And so far, yes, we've really not delved into that too much, but one issue that I've noticed in trying to bring in descriptions from Kent in the past is that they come in for every boring, which creates quite a mess to clean up. And in the end is probably more work than it would have been if you had just added them by hand to begin with. I'm sure that there's probably a better solution in ORD, and we will definitely be exploring that. If anybody, of course, has any input on that, that would be greatly appreciated. There's a question about timeline. Seems like the timeline for SPT data is a few years. Any idea when other data will be available for input? CPT, site liquefaction, DOT, et cetera. Currently, we can get the SPT blood count data and like water levels, that sort of thing, into the model. It's not exactly the way we would like it to look, so that's one thing that we'll be working on. I really don't have an answer for the other types of data. I would imagine that those would be available sometime in the future, but displaying of some of those might be kind of tough in a 3D model. Let's see. Will SPT bubbles and water table cells be annotated to the 3D view and somehow projected to the cross sections? Yes, that I would imagine that in the 2D they're going to look much like they did previously. It's in the 3D model where those things may not even necessarily show that stuff in the 3D model. That's some things that we have to work with Ben on and kind of figure out how we're going to do that stuff. And the last one here, do you think we need to have more intelligent standard boring layout, example, increasing boring number and offset from center line, such that the meshes are created more accurately without overlap / conflict? Well, yeah, I mean, it would be nice to have, a lot more boreholes than we have now. It's just time and money, right? Of course, money is always a big issue. Doing extra borings from a time standpoint is also something that we don't always have the luxury of having an infinite amount of time to collect data. Now, do we start supplementing borings with other types of data like seismic, EPR, that sort of thing? That's something I think we're going to have to look at. But for now, we'll probably be putting this interpretation point tool to use and trying to fine tune the meshes for the loop. So that's all I've got, Tonya, in the chat. I think most everything else, up until just the last few minutes that I've been talking, things come up, I haven't answered those. But if there's any other questions out there, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Yeah, and I do want to kind of pop in. I saw, Nathan, you had a question about training. There is a plan to create training modules for geotechnicals ORD production once we've gotten everything ironed out. The plan is a manual would be created, and we're still bantying around, having maybe one training and then having it recorded so that it's available for folks to access at any given time. So we've still got some discussion to be had going forward on exactly how we want to proceed with the training, but we will provide training. We will create a how-to similar to what's available currently for your SS4 roadway production. So, I mean, obviously we want to make sure that everybody's still on the same page. on how to do everything, and having everybody looking at the same training, the same how-tos and things like that has made all of our lives much easier, I think. It certainly made for, a good consistent product coming from our PEFs going forward, and I think some consistencies internally too.
So a question came up about, will Gint continue to be used going forward, or is a switch to open ground being considered? I would say yes, we're considering that, but at the moment, there's no connectivity between open ground and ORD, so like we have to be in civil now for ORD, so we're kind of waiting on that interface to be created, and then at that time, we'll give that a test run. See, but for the immediate future, we'll be sticking with Gint.
Well, if anybody has any questions that they want to verbally ask any additional questions. There are some questions that are still kind of coming
Yep,
through, and I don't want to step on anybody's toes, so I'm going to shut up. Sorry about that.
That's okay. For the question about features available to standardize soil descriptions so that it can auto-populate on profile cross-section sheets. Like I say, I'm sure there's a better solution to the whole description thing. One thing with like open ground, of course, was the whole possibility of going to electronic logging, which then you would have more standardized descriptions. It's still kind of a issue of coming up with those kind of generalized descriptions, like especially on profiles. Cross sections, not such a big deal, but like I say, that's something we'll and would it be possible for GU to begin sending out some sort of update on where you guys are with ORD? I'm sure that's definitely something that we will start doing. To be quite frank, really not a whole lot has happened over the last 3 years. Most of the stuff that you have seen has been successes that we've had in the last few months due to some new things that have come out in ORD as far as the Geotech tools that are allowing us to actually get data into the model. And also, we've had a lot of assistance from Tim Merrill with ESB developing some workarounds because one big thing that wasn't shown in the video is there's no way to get points from Gint using Gint Civil if you don't have holding and instance. So there's a little bit of a workaround using some of the survey tools that allow us to do that. So there's still some things that we need some help on, kind of streamline this process, getting the Geotech data into ORD. I'm sure those things will come. It's just waiting on new releases. Any other questions out there?
Feel free to speak up if you got it. If you don't want to put it in the chat window, I think everybody's available to unmute at this point in time. But yeah, we were actually quite excited over the last couple of weeks with some of the milestones that we've been able to hit. And we are still working directly with representatives from Bentley to kind of solve some of our other issues and problems. And we've had some successes with that as well. And Tonya, I think this is a question for you of when the download for the recording of the session is going to be available?
It really kind of depends. I would say don't expect anything to be uploaded or downloadable until after this week's events, because it would just make sense. NC Lug is run by a lot of volunteers, and so it's a matter of compiling everything and getting it all uploaded to the website. I don't know if Patty is online and she can answer any more specifics about that.
Actually, all the recordings are up there as of right now. So this one I hope to have up by, let's say, tomorrow.
Well, you're a rock star.
Wonderful,
I apologize
on the ball
for speaking out of turn then. And then as far as questions, I did want to just let everybody know that I have included it in the chat twice. There is an email that was created, an email address that was created so that people can email if other questions come up and you didn't have a chance to verbalize or put it in the chat, or you thought over it, after you're making dinner tonight and you're thinking of these questions, there's an email, and I'll put it in the chat again. Thank you, John. John just put it in the chat, and we ask that because this is the same email address for every session, if you can just put something in the subject line to indicate it's for Geotech, so that we can make sure it gets to the appropriate person and routed back so that all the questions can be answered.
All right. I think this is a good time to say last call for any questions.
I will say that we're working on putting together a step-by-step for what you've seen today. That is in the works. So if anybody is interested in getting that, just shoot me an email or use the email that's noted in the chat there. When that's available, we'll try to send that out. Start testing it and giving us some ideas of things that we might do.
You can think of it as a proto how-to. And I know that a lot of y'all are potentially on teams that are going to be working on division projects that don't directly go through the geotechnical engineering unit. And I have heard some chatter so far that there has been requests about showing geotechnical data or working with geotechnical data in ORD. So that might also kind of help you if you do find yourself in a position where you might be working directly with ORD products, maybe before we've even gone live with it.
Okay, if no one else has any questions, or Christina, Kevin, if either of you are we done? Shall we just wrap things up?
Yeah, I think we look good here.
Okay, thank you again. Great job, great presentation, a lot of good information. I did want to remind everybody that the PDH credit receipts will be sent out to attendees soon. The exact date when those go out, I don't know, but soon is going to be the best I can give for right now. Please stay tuned to the next NC Lug presentation, which will be session 6 at 3 o'clock today. It's ORD with Rail. And be sure to join us on Friday at noon for the Q&A wrap-up session for all of the different questions that may have come up over the different sessions that you're attending. If you have any suggestions for any future NC Lug topics or questions for NC Lug, please feel free to email us at events@nclug.com, and be sure to tell others to join NC Lug. It's free, and we'll be able to send out invites to upcoming events. Thanks again to everyone, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks, Christina. Thanks, Kevin.
All right, everybody have a good afternoon.
Yeah, thank you all.
You too.